The cabin of Flight 735 hummed softly as passengers settled into their seats, but tension had already taken shape long before takeoff. An elderly African-American gentleman named Elias Vance sat quietly in his assigned first-class seat, his manner reserved, his posture composed. Yet for the flight attendant, Miss Cynthia Hayes, none of that mattered. The moment she noticed him, something shifted in her expression, a tightening in her mouth that revealed what she tried to hide under forced professionalism. She approached, voice polite in tone, but cutting underneath, asking if he was sure he was in the right place. Elias handed her his first-class boarding pass without hesitation. She barely looked at it before snapping that he belonged in economy. Passengers noticed, some uncomfortable, others indifferent, none willing to intervene. Without raising his voice, Elias repeated only that he expected respect. She dismissed him with the claim of a system error and ordered him to move to the rear while the matter was sorted. The humiliation was quiet, deliberate, and practiced. Passengers avoided his eyes as he walked down the aisle, but Ms. Hayes announced triumphantly that the situation was resolved, implying the problem had been him. Hours later, stiff and hungry, Elias approached the galley to ask whether any meals remained. Ms. Hayes responded with mock politeness and theatrical sighs, joking loudly about caviar and champagne, drawing nervous laughter from some crew. She eventually handed him a cold vegetarian tray, missing utensils and napkins. Elias carried it back without complaint. When he later asked for water, she ignored him. Then came the whispered insult disguised as procedure, a supposed odor complaint, implying he was unclean. He warned her quietly that she was making a very serious mistake, not out of threat, but out of certainty. She ignored him, believing she held authority. As the plane descended toward Canyon City International, the atmosphere calmed, and Hayes walked the aisle with satisfaction, believing the incident was over with her victorious. Yet when the passengers disembarked, 3 men in dark corporate suits stood waiting at the gate. They addressed Elias with formal respect, welcoming him and escorting him to a secure vehicle. Passengers paused mid-step, confusion rippling through the line as they realized something was happening that did not match the story Hayes had constructed. Hayes followed behind, still unaware. One of the pilots casually asked a colleague if that was the airline's new CEO. The word struck her like physical impact. Elias Vance, the man she had belittled, dismissed, and humiliated, was the incoming chief executive officer of Transatlantic Airways, the first black CEO in the company's history. Hayes froze, blood draining from her face. The walk into the terminal suddenly felt endless. She replayed every word she had said to him, every sneer, every insult. The passengers who once ignored the conflict now watched her with quiet realization. At corporate headquarters, employees filled the main auditorium, awaiting the CEO's introductory appearance. Hayes had been invited along with a few mid-level flight attendants, a gesture she had interpreted as honor. She had taken extra care with her uniform, makeup, posture, believing she was being recognized for excellence. Instead, the room's energy shifted as whispers circulated. Executives straightened their jackets. Screens flickered on. Hayes sat stiffly near the back, dread pressing into her spine. She did not know how much Elias had seen, remembered, or intended to reveal. She only knew the truth stood now in front of everyone. She had not merely insulted a passenger. She had humiliated the very person who now held authority over her entire future. The auditorium lights dimmed. A voice announced that the new CEO would address the company momentarily. The entire room rose to its feet. Hayes's breath caught. The doors at the front of the hall opened. Elias Vance stepped forward, not hurried, not triumphant, simply steady, composed, and unbothered as he had been on the plane. No one spoke. No one moved. The silence was absolute, waiting. Hayes's pulse hammered in her ears. She could not tell if she was about to be called out publicly, dismissed quietly, or left to suffer in the unbearable anticipation of consequences that had not yet arrived. The moment stretched, poised on the edge of revelation, the reckoning not yet complete. Ladies and gentlemen, the master of ceremonies began from the stage. Today marks a truly historic, fundamental shift in the future direction of our beloved airline. After decades of deep tradition, we proudly step forward into a new era of genuine vision, shared humanity, and deep-seated transformation. The lights dimmed significantly. A high-definition projection filled the enormous screen. Elias Vance stepping composedly off the plane just that morning. Cane in hand, posture upright, surrounded by his advisors. A rapid ripple of recognition and quiet shock spread across the room. Ms. Hayes went instantly pale. I proudly present to you the new Chief Executive Officer of Transatlantic Airways, Mr. Elias Vance. Thunderous, sustained applause followed. She couldn't possibly clap. She could barely gasp for air. Her stomach violently knotted. Elias stepped onto the stage with his usual quiet control. No flashy grin, no exaggerated grand gestures. He waited for the massive room to fall into a dense silence before he finally spoke. "Thank you all very much," he began, his voice carrying clearly. "I will not speak about what I did to get here to this moment. That truly is not important. What matters most is what we as a collective do now, together, with all of your stories and all of your personal truths." The auditorium fell into absolute silence. This morning, while traveling as a regular, paying passenger on one of our corporate flights, I personally experienced treatment that our stated diversity policy claims, in writing, to absolutely condemn. Heads slowly turned. Eyes scanned the room. Ms. Hayes felt the burning pressure of 1,000 invisible spotlights directly on her. I was racially profiled, repeatedly humiliated, and then ignored, not as a powerful executive, but simply as a human being, he said. His eyes locked onto hers from across the room. No name was spoken, none was needed. "And I am not here to retaliate against anyone," he continued. "I am here to fundamentally restore dignity to this company, to use power not as a crude weapon, but rather as a mirror." He let the silence speak for itself. "Effective immediately, I have ordered a full audit of every discrimination-related report within this airline. Any single act of racism, systemic bias, or dehumanization, regardless of tenure or title, will be documented and severely sanctioned." Her spine stiffened. Her hands trembled. "No one in this company is above accountability," he finished. "Not anymore." He stepped down from the stage, renewed applause rising sharply behind him. But to Ms. Hayes, it sounded like a judge's gavel. By late afternoon, the email arrived. Subject: Internal Ethics Hearing. Immediate attendance required. The ethics department was on the 14th floor. She walked in with her chin high and a folder of documents clutched tightly. She believed 20 years of spotless service would defend her. 3 people were seated inside. One from legal, one from HR, and Elias Vance himself. He did not stand. He simply nodded. "Ms. Hayes," the HR representative began, "this is a preliminary ethics review concerning your conduct on this morning's Flight 735. She smiled thinly. It was all a misunderstanding. A coincidence. Elias opened a folder. "This is the complete flight incident report. Passenger statements, crew testimony, gate observations. The pattern is unmistakable." She swallowed. "I was following protocol." His voice remained calm. "Protocol does not include humiliation, condescension, or prejudice. You did not know who I was. That is irrelevant. What matters is that you failed to treat me as a person." Silence settled. The HR representative spoke. "Effective immediately, your flight attendant license is suspended pending final review." Her voice failed. Elias stood. "Respect is measured when you believe no one will ever see your actions." He left the room. She remained alone, forced to confront the truth of her behavior. She thought of every flight, every uniform adjustment, every moment she believed professionalism meant control rather than care. The silence in the room did not accuse her. It revealed her. She understood that dignity was not a privilege granted to certain passengers, but a right owed to every human being who crossed her path. It was undeniable and irreversible. Her world had changed.